conservatives against liberals. Pick your side and get ready to fight. There's a great story in the book called Holy Hilarity. There was a Baptist church in Atlanta that had a problem with parking. Speaking of parking, looks like my wife's getting ready to find a parking space. But this Baptist church had a problem with parking. There were two other churches that were very nearby. There was a Catholic church and an Episcopal church. And parking was hard to come by, and so what would happen is the two other churches, the Catholics and the Episcopalians, had earlier services and masses, and so the people from those churches would park in the Baptist church parking lot. And so when they came for worship, they didn't have any place to park, lots of them. So then the Baptists came up with what they thought was a pretty good idea. Members of the Baptist church spent one Sunday morning putting bumper stickers on all of the cars that were in their parking lot. And the bumper sticker said, "I'm proud to be a Baptist." Us against them, right? But things are better than they used to be. Long ago, there was an incident between Episcopalians and Presbyterians. When one Episcopal missionary, this was when our country was very, very young, this Episcopal missionary went to preach in the Carolinas. And the local Presbyterians were not happy about that. So it says, it's written in the book, that they disrupted his services, rioted while this pastor preached, started a pack of dogs fighting outside the church, stole his horse, let it loose, stole his church key when he wasn't looking. They even locked him up in a room and refused to give him food and drink. And they gave 2 barrels of whiskey to his congregation. Now, some of us might not think that's punishment, but in that day, I think it was. I wonder if these Episcopalians maybe welcomed that last gift. Later, after escaping and returning back to the church, the missionary wrote this about the Presbyterian enemies. He said, "They delight in their present low, loutish heathenism, hellish life, and they seem not desirous to change it." I don't know about you, but when I think of Presbyterians today, I don't think of any of those adjectives to describe them. Low, loutish, heathens, hellish. No. Times have changed for the better. John said, "Teacher, we saw somebody driving out demons in your name, and we told him to stop because he was not one of us." Jesus said, "Don't stop him." He said, "For no one who does a miracle in my name can in the next moment say anything against me, because whoever is not against us is for us." Isn't that just like Jesus? Doesn't he know that we like to huddle in our own little groups, our own little cliques? We have small town and big city people. We have blacks and whites and Hispanics, and you know the rest. Gays and straights, religious and atheists, right wing, left wing. How dare Jesus ruin our fun? We enjoy looking down on people who are not like us, who look at life differently than we do, and who have a different set of values than we do. Jesus said, "Don't stop them. Anybody that does a miracle in my name can in the next moment say anything bad about me." You know, I think it's natural the way we are. It's natural to prefer to be around people who are like you. Sociologists have a name for it. It's a big one. It's called ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism. People prefer people who are like them. That's the way we are. It's human nature. We are uncomfortable around people who are different than we are. It doesn't matter how they're different. If they're different, we're just not comfortable around them. Years back, when everybody dressed, remember when everybody dressed in their Sunday best to come to church? All the guys had suit and tie. All the girls had dresses or skirts, hats. Well, if someone would have walked in those days in blue jeans, they would have probably felt uncomfortable. And they might have made other people uncomfortable around them. Now today, at least in this church, if you walk in here in a suit, you might feel uncomfortable. Because we're a lot more casual than we used to be. But we like to be around people who are like us, who dress like we do, who look like we do, who think like we do, come from the same kind of families, who share the same values that we do. The church in the late 1900s, there was a problem, and the biggest problem with ethnocentrism, that word again, seemed to be racial. And a man named Dr. Harold Porter was a Presbyterian pastor in California, and he had some really delightful things to say about this experience. He said that California at that time was just really exploding. It was growing like a weed. And adjacent to their church, there was a whole city that had developed within just 10 years. And there were 14,000 people in this city. But there was not one single African American living in that town. Not one. Population of 14,000. They were excluded by law. The law said that anyone should be able to sell their house only to people who they decided were acceptable. And you can guess who the people were that were not acceptable. I understand that we once had very similar laws here, where people who were African Americans were told that they had to be out of town, out of the city limits, within a certain time frame. Before dark, I think it was. They had to be out of town. And so if they were here to work or whatever reason they were here, African American people had to go out to the hotel on the edge of town because it was illegal for them to stay. Sundown law or something like that, I think it was. Well, when this was happening in California, the clergy group there decided that they didn't think it was right, and they decided that something should be done, so they decided to hold a press conference. And at this press conference, they surprisingly got a lot of attention and a lot of notice from the press. And afterward, he said that a local realtor, which all the realtors were quite angry, and one of them came up to him after it was all over and said, "Why didn't you consult with us first before you went to the press?" And the pastor said, "Well, why didn't you first check with people who were followers of God or who were religious, part of the religious community, before you developed your racially prejudiced policy?" I think that was a good answer. Thankfully, California's law changed not too long after that, about a year later, and housing equality was assured. So it's normal for people to want to be around people, to prefer people who are like them. The problem comes when this discomfort turns into opposition, when it turns into persecution, prejudice. Bishop Fulton Sheen, anybody ever heard of him? Yeah, he was a well-known bishop of the Catholic Church, known for his outstanding preaching and his television and radio shows. Sheen said that one time he had a story about denominational conflicts. He said that one time he lived in New York City for a little while, and he had to walk from his apartment on 38th Street near Park Avenue to his office, which was near the Empire State Building. And he said every day he would pass the old home of J.P. Morgan, the rich banker who had passed away, and the Lutheran Church had bought J.P. Morgan's house. And they were redoing it, and they were adding a 5-story building to it for office space. And one day, he said, as he walked by, one of the hard hat workers who was working on putting up this 5-story addition recognized Sheen. And he yelled down to him. He said, "What do you think about us Catholics putting up a building for these lousy Methodists?" And Sheen yelled back up to him, "They're not Methodists, they're Lutherans. But it doesn't matter. They're all friends of ours." That was a good answer. One of the guys looked up to another guy up above him, and he was standing on a rafter on the 5th floor, and he hollered up there, "Okay, boys, you can go ahead and put the rivets in." The rivets hold the building together. Bishop Sheen, of course, was making a little joke. But it's no joke that all the harm, a lot of harm has been done through the years in the name of religion. We stand today and we point our fingers at those people in Israel and those, the Israeli and Hamas, and we say, "You people are terrible. Look what you're doing to each other." But you know what? They are no worse than some of the acts that were committed by Protestants and Roman Catholics against one another through the years. They're no worse than when we came to this country and drove the Native Americans out of the land and told them, "You're going to live in that little spot over there, or we're going to kill you." No worse at all. So let's not point our finger at people who are at war with one another. We, down through our history, have done some horrible things to people. One story caught my attention. Some time ago, Pakistan's Daily Times reported on violence at an engineering college. This is really something. The Times printed these words: "What started as an exchange of words snowballed into a fist fight. Fighting was over a poster urging students not to fight on campus. The fight was over who would put up the poster and where it would go." Now, how ridiculous is that? We fight over everything, don't we? One of our duties as followers of Christ is to bring peace, to share our thoughts, and to bring peace to our world. We follow Jesus, who was called the Prince of Peace. Thank you, the Prince of Peace. Here's what our text calls us to think about. What happens when we can't get along among ourselves? In the Canterbury Tales, there's a description of a person, a priest of a rural country church. Here it is in modern English. Quote, "He was a good man, a person who thought only holy thoughts and did only good deeds. He was very gentle, diligent, and always patient in the face of adversity. He never looked down on any of his poor parishioners who didn't have money to donate to the church. In fact, he'd rather give them what little money he himself had, especially since he lived happily on very little money himself. He didn't think himself better than others, but he would scold people for being too stubborn in their ways. The county where he lived was large, and the houses were spread far apart, but that didn't stop him from visiting his parishioners, rich or poor. He truly was the embodiment of the teachings of Jesus Christ. He lived as he preached, which set the perfect example for his parishioners, his flock of sheep." Then came these unforgettable words. He lived by the motto, "If gold rust, what then will iron do? For if a priest be foul and can't be trusted, no wonder that a common person should rust." To me, that reminder isn't just for pastors or priests, but for the whole Christian community. If gold rust, then what will iron do? We are called to be light in a dark, dark world. We are called to bring that light, to bring it to the darkness. If we don't do that, then what hope is there for this world? If gold rust, what then will iron do? Jesus said to his disciples, whoever is not against us is for us. The church of Jesus Christ, the Catholics down the street, the Congregationalists down the street, the Baptists up the street, the UCC here and in LaSalle and in Spring Valley, all of these churches are the part of the Church of Jesus Christ, and they are called to be unified, a unifying force in human society, not a divisive one. It's not our calling to be divisive. Our nation and our world seem to be more and more fragmented all the time. We see it everywhere we look. Government is one perfect example. Liberals, conservatives, fundamentalists all over this world seem to be at one another's throats. Why can't we all, in the words of Rodney King, just get along? Why can't we do that? There was an ironic story in the Associated Press a few months back, and this is how it read. Tens of thousands of people packed St. Peter's Square in Vatican City to hear Pope Francis pray for peace in Ukraine. The ceremony was topped by the release of 2 white peace doves, but unfortunately, a seagull and a crow attacked and killed the doves. Isn't that a metaphor for life in today's world? I think it is. Who will show us the way out of all of this mess? I hope that it will be the people of God. Our lesson for today shows the disciples that acting territorial or jealous or guarding our claim to represent Jesus is all foolish. On one level, it's understandable, because in that day and time, you see, disciples, when they followed a certain rabbi, were responsible for carrying on his legacy after he was gone. And they were identified not only by their own names, but the name of their rabbi. It was a very close connection. And that was the way disciples and rabbis worked back in that day. Well, it was also very exclusive. It would be an invasion for anyone else to use your rabbi's name unless they had followed him. And even to use his teachings if you were not authorized by him. And so the disciples of Jesus heard a man using Jesus' name to preach and to drive out demons, and he was not authorized to do so. Well, Jesus turned that whole thing upside down and said, he's doing the same thing you are doing. He's working for me. He told them to leave him alone. And in verse 41, he expands this idea, saying that even one who performs the smallest act of hospitality in his name, like giving somebody a cold glass of water when they're thirsty, belong to him and will be rewarded. Jesus was not interested in exclusiveness. Wasn't then and isn't now. We are called to bring Christ's peace to the world. How can we do that if we are fighting amongst ourselves? Church, wake up. Some of you may know the story behind the statue called Christ of the Andes. In 1899, the people of Argentina and Chile were at war, were ready to go to war. An Argentine bishop came and appealed for peace between them. A Chilean bishop decided to do something, and he went and talked to King Edward VII, who made a decision a decree that settled the whole thing, and there was an agreement. And so then they took all of the ammunition and all of the guns and the equipment that they would have used in war, they melted it all down, and they made it into a gigantic statue of Jesus and put it up on a mountain right between the two countries as a reminder so that there would be no war. That's our legacy as followers of Christ. May we be representatives of peace with all people. Amen.